So, without further ado, let's get started. So, tonight we meaning the Arling Ventures team is extremely excited to talk to you about something that is extremely important in this day and age. We have more and more persons who are aging, and caregiving is a big part of the fabric of our society. I think there's an expectation that, as people age, there will be someone who will take care of them, right? In fact, there are some people who have children in part because they are hoping that there will be someone there to take care of them. And so we're really excited to have Dr. Gia Vanna Jones on tonight, because we are going to get into what it means to be a caregiver. Um, the fact that caregiving is almost like a, a labor of love in a sense, which it definitely is, right? And so I want to take a bird's eye view of why we are having this conversation. So, the Arling Ventures team is actually running an IDB Lab funded project, and it's called the Silver Economy Growth Hub. And this project in particular is focused on multiple things. The reality is that we're part of the Latin American and Caribbean region, and we are the fastest aging region in the world, right? It's expected within the coming years that 1 out of 4 of us will be over the age of 60. This is a very relevant conversation because we've heard the controversial NIB having to raise the contribution rates every 2 years. Why? Because there's not enough people who are working to support those who are retired and need pension. And so our project focuses on one, entrepreneurship, encouraging entrepreneurship in those who are over the age of 50. That is the silver economy. The silver economy consists of those persons who are over the age of 50, their economic activity, their consumption. And then we're also focusing on those persons who are producing and providing goods and services to those who are 50 and over. Someone who is in their 20s and in their 30s has very different needs from someone who is 55, someone who is 75. And so we're also looking to see how we can foster entrepreneurship for those persons who would like to serve the older adult population. And then we're also looking at mentorship as well. And we're also sensitizing the public to aging and the fact that aging is not a burden. One, it doesn't need to be a burden on our economic systems as much as it is. And it doesn't need to be as much of a burden, even emotionally, right? And so we are having these types of conversations to just talk to the public and have a conversation about what it looks like to age in the Bahamas, what it looks like to age in the Caribbean. And so throughout this conversation, it will be a dialogue between myself and Dr. Gia. Um, and you can feel free to drop your questions in the chat. There will be a Q&A session towards the end. But if you do have a question that works into the conversation at that time, then I will definitely pose it to Dr. Gia. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Gia. I'll pull up her bio really quickly. This is the abridged version of a very accomplished woman. Okay, so Dr. G is an applied social psychologist. She is a therapist and author whose work explores the integration of Christian faith and emotional health. Drawing from psychology, neuroscience, and spiritual formation, she teaches on identity, healing, leadership, and rest, helping individuals move from striving toward grounded wholeness. She is the author of The Strong One and is currently completing its revised edition alongside her forthcoming book, Return to Rest. Through writing, teaching, and counseling, Dr. Gia equips people to live from secure identity rather than performance driven strength. So, thank you, Dr. Gia, for taking time out of your busy schedule. And I'm really grateful that you are on the island and able to take part in this conversation.
Thank you
So,
for having me.
thank you. The first conversation or the first question I'd like to ask is, who is a caregiver? What is a caregiver? Because there are a lot of people who do this, but they don't know that they're actually caregiving.
Yeah. And I think that's an excellent place to start because, just like you said, may not always be aware that you are offering care. But this label of caregiving applies to anybody who has taken on the role to provide, whether it is emotional and physical to support the healthcare regimen and interventions that may be needed on a regular basis. We do have people who are caregivers whose entire lives revolve around those that they are caring for, and then there are others who they may have additional resources and so may not necessarily see themselves as that. But if you are the responsible person in the way that
Mhm.
it is very obvious with the parent child dynamic, so we know regardless of how independent that child is, as long as they are a minor, that you are responsible for them. You're the responsible person. I think when we reverse that and you are the person who, if there's a doctor's appointment, the doctor has to speak with you in addition to the person who is the patient. You are the one who kind of doing the banking and managing the bills and such. Then you are a caregiver. So that can
Mhm.
be daughter, son, spouse, sibling, anybody. You absorbed what is required in order for that person's quality of life to be maximized.
Mhm. Good. So now that we've established that, I know that I know a lot of caregivers. You know a lot of caregivers. And so you can see the signs of burnout, right?
Mhm.
But can you tell us a bit more about what caregiver burnout looks like?
Yeah. So I think um, burnout is burnout. Um, the putting the label of caregiver in the front of it is adding a level of nuance that is helping the person to identify the reason for it in a way that
Mhm.
a lot of times we are unable to. But I like to shift our thinking about burnout from just exhaustion. Most people think that it's just exhaustion. I
Mhm.
press and push that burnout happens when that the source, the thing that once gave your life or work meaning, stops sustaining you. So you are essentially running on effort rather than connection or joy or meaning. And so
Mhm.
at this point, it is less about can you show up and perform, because I interact a lot with strong ones, and I know we'll get to talk a little bit about them at that profile of person. And burnout looks different because you're still performing, you're still showing up, you're still doing all of the things. And a lot of times, I think when people think burnout, they are literally thinking this person who is slumped over, can't move, can't do anything. And that's
Mhm.
just simply not the case. It's not going to be the
Mhm.
case if burnout is occurring and you are a leader. It is not the case if burnout is occurring and you have someone responsible for you, whether that person is your aging parent who is suffering with a long-term chronic illness and requires your care, or older child who may have a developmental disability and will always require you to have some kind of care for them, or if it's just, the kinds of things that life throws at you that may be so consistent that causes, where again, joy, meaning, purpose, the kinds of connective things that make us come alive are missing.
Mhm. So, as I look around and even just looking at the conversations online, in the Caribbean culture, who is more likely to be tasked with the caregiving responsibilities? I have my opinions, but
Yeah,
you tell us.
so there is no doubt, absolutely no doubt that it is going to be the child in the absence of a capable, supportive partner. And I'll say partner rather than spouse, because sometimes not only those who are married. In the absence of a capable, supportive partner, it is going to be either the eldest child,
Mhm.
but let's be real, it's going to be the girl child where that exists. So whether that girl, woman is the eldest, the middle, the baby, uh, more than the likely she's going to be that person. Now, in families where there are multiple female offspring, then it may go to the oldest who may just naturally have the kinds of tendencies that lend itself to caregiving. But yes.
Mhm. Mhm. And so, how does that affect them mentally, identity wise, relationship wise?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I think at the core of the impact to us is our coping and what coping looks like for that person. So I
Mhm.
said that burnout occurs when we are disconnected from our source, when the things, and these are the intangibles, this is definitely nothing to do with the actual things, but when the kinds of things that are important to us, we feel disconnected from and no longer give joy.
Mhm.
Um, and so, what we find with those who are the responsible one, who have this level of obligation, expectation, is this natural inclination to push, to create the necessary systems, put those systems in place to essentially adapt themselves, because it is an adaptation to be able to show up and do what is needed for them. And a lot of
Mhm.
times those take roles, or I frame them as masks in my book, that are, that are more easily categorized.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Thanks for muting. So I have a theory that I have come to, and then we're getting to the strong one, right? But I have a theory that I came to the conclusion of maybe like 2 years ago. And that is, as we mentioned, gender roles. It is a scam and it does not pay off to be a smart girl or to be capable.
Mhm.
Because what that often does is it puts extra responsibility, early responsibility, and there's almost a sense of, well, you got it, you can take care of it, even if it's a child.
Yeah.
And so let's go into the strong one, right? And you can define what the strong one is for the context of this conversation. And then let's talk about why that is something that we slip into.
Yeah. So I'll start by saying, or I'll continue, because this is really a continuation of where the previous response. It's like caregiving is such a level of responsibility for so many people that it can literally absorb your whole sense of self. And when that happens, what then emerges is you no longer know who you are outside of that role.
Mm,
And that then means that it's going to be much easier for you to then become the caregiver, to become the responsible one, to become the one that people go to for all of the other people in your life. Okay. Now, you talked about the trick of being the smart girl. And I nodded in agreement, because I do think that there is something fundamental about the girl child. When I taught at UB, I would teach social psychology, and in the text, we talk about norms and cultures and behaviors and those kinds of things. And the one piece of research that continually showed up consistently true across cultures is the way that children are reared based on gender. Girl children, whether we are talking about majority world, which includes, like Asia, Africa, the continent of Africa, the Asia's, Pacifics, those kinds of things, or Western world, where most of us get our culture and our understanding from. Girl children are raised to be inside. They are raised to be caretakers. They are raised to be ones who are just essentially kind of homemakers. That would be the best way that I can call it. Boy
Mhm.
children is not, there's no, well, I shouldn't say there's no consistency. The one consistent thing, and it's been a while since I've seen the research on this, so maybe it has been updated. I doubt it. But the one thing that was consistent is that boy children were allowed to play more freely and were allowed to be outside more often. And what that does for a girl at a very young age, it shapes how, again, she sees herself and her value
Mhm.
and her worth and her identity. Because if from very early on, we are shaped to believe that our very purpose is dependent upon those who we serve, care for, um, provide for, and not necessarily in the like financial provision, but the kind of always thinking about for someone, then
Mhm.
it's going to be very easy for you to fall in the trap where that is the best version of yourself. And you build a life around that in ways that are insidious. Like you're not even going to realize when it's happening. It's just going to like flow out of that. Now, where does the strong one come in? I will give context. So the strong one emerged for me, I want to say probably about 10 years ago. And it was because I was fighting my own burnout. And I just had a lot of people all the time referring to me as strong. And at
Mhm.
first I was like, yeah. And it was the cape that I wore. I was superwoman. I was doing these things and I was doing more things. And it was amazing. And then it wasn't. And
Mhm.
I wrote about it in the book and I actually kept it in the second version of the book because I remember and I can still see it clearly. I walked into church one afternoon and I felt so harried. And but I am the consummate kind of duck moving on the pond. The feet under the water that you can't see is like going 500 miles per hour, but the above the water is just smooth, collected. And that's one of my graces that I just bring sense of calm, typically in chaos. So I was feeling lots of chaos, but I walked in and no one could really get that. Um, and part of that was also because I hid a lot of that part of myself as well. And a dear friend said, "Oh, look at Gia. That's my hero. She's so strong and always have it all together." And I promise you, the recoil I recoiled, like internally, I really wanted to
Yeah.
scream, I'm nobody's superwoman. Like I just don't want to be it, cute Karen white hair. But like literally it was just like, I don't want to be that. And I remember thinking, like how did I get here and why did I get here? And I started therapy, started journaling, started all of these things, and then the book emerged. And in the book I just kind of shaped the strong one as these profiles. I have since redefined it, and so the new book that is coming out, we're looking at them as masks because the profiles lend itself too much to personality. And I don't like the idea of labeling in a way that people think that this is them because this is adapted. This is a coping strategy. What
Yeah.
happens is you have a particular environment that you are placed in, certain things happen and you learn how to navigate the world. And so from learning how to navigate the world, you learn what strength looks like and to be strong. And usually for strong ones, that is ensuring that everything stays moving, stays together, that you are the person that everyone can lean on. I'll pause there.
No, I mean, if you want to go on and add, you can.
Yeah, okay. All right. So I propose four masks. They've been updated since I wrote the first book. And the ones that, as I was thinking about caregiving, there are two, maybe three that are more salient. And one is the helper mask. And the helper
Mm.
mask is, or the person who wears the helper mask is going to be the one who anticipates needs before it's even spoken and essentially will not rest until everything is tended to. This person, and I'm framing this outside of the gender specificity that I have for the
Mhm.
strong one. So, for context, I wrote the strong one for women because that's primarily my audience, but I know that there were men who had resonance in it. And in this caregiving world, there are men who are caregiving, and these things cross gender divide. So, I'm going to just generally refer to them as the person. But if you see that the way that you approach caring for your loved ones, caring for others, is such that you are constantly thinking about what's next, what has to happen. And this is whether you have additional support or not. So there are going to be some
Mhm.
instances people are going to be like, Dr. G, it only me and that. So I have to do that. Cool, cool. That's fine, or it's not, because are you the only person? Have you explored other options that could provide yourself a little bit of relief? And in because you're oriented so much to providing the support, this has become your world that you can't even see that there are other alternatives, there are other options for you out there. So that's broad, and this is very, 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 very broad. Helper.
Mhm.
The other one is the protector. The protector, when I frame it in the book, usually emerges from some early trauma, and they learn that control is the way that they keep themselves safe. And so I see the protector showing up in the caregiving as the one who needs that level of control to ensure essentially that the person that they love remains safe and well cared for. So they are tracking, watching, staying alert. These are the ones who we call paranoid, like, girl, or babe, why you, like, give it a break? It's
Mhm.
okay. They sleep, and it's kind of like watching them like a hawk. And
Mhm.
I think for all intents and purposes, those would be the two that kind of latch on to caregiving a lot. Um, and it's so interesting when you approach me about this, and I know you know my story, but in terms of caregiving, while I am not the caregiver, our family, we have been journeying. I think now it's 5 years. My dad, whose diagnosis was early onset dementia, because it came before it was just about when he turned 60. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, we're definitely in year five or more now. And just kind of being a part of the core support from my mom, who is his primary caregiver. And I learned to be strong from my mummy. So it has been my purpose, uh, is not only because I love my dad and want to be a part of his support team, but also I need to make
Mhm.
sure that my mummy does not fall into one of these things and get stuck so deeply in the rut of caregiving that she loses herself in it. And she and I have talked
Mhm.
about that on numerous occasions. And the things that I will offer later are things that I see her doing, which is leaning on others, asking for help, and started slower, but I can see it being
Mhm.
now almost a reflex that she does rather than having to actually pause and think, which is the healthy way. You want to get it where asking for help is a reflex.
Good. Um, Thank you. So I actually wrote down, does the helper ask for help?
No,
No. Why?
no.
Why not?
Actually, none of the strong one mask ask for help. And there are a number of reasons. The helper's identity is fully subsumed in helping. And so to ask for help would be actually detrimental to their sense of self. If they can't do it, if they cannot do it, then
Mhm.
that is a problem. So
Mhm.
even receiving help is usually on a very limited basis. The
Mhm.
helper will share about weakness after they've essentially figured out the solution for it. So the admission of kind of like, oh, I'm going through something usually comes after they have already walked themselves through it. So yeah, no, helping that helper mask becomes just so much of who I am that I don't I don't ask for help. The other thing, and this is important for everyone who's listening and who will listen to this, is what we practice really does become who we are. So
Mhm.
even if you get to the point where you are at burnout and you genuinely do want help, it is going to not be your first, second, or third thought to ask for help or to even see the help that is there if you have
Mhm.
spent so much time doing it all yourself. And it's like very, very innocent. It may be that there are other people in the room and you just automatically jump up when this need emerges
Mhm.
without even thinking that somebody else in the room could also help, that you could delegate, that you could ask for help, or that maybe the request did not even come to you. You automatically assume it came to you because you are in the room and that is what you do. So that then when you get to the point where you're like, I'm tired and I want help, you may be saying that, but don't even recognize that help is like knocking, like literally knocking on your door.
Mhm. So I will mention this comment and ask this question because it's relevant right now in the conversation.
Mhm.
Raquel says, good evening. I agree that caregiving generally falls on the girl child, but if boys are not raised to be caregivers, who will caregive? Also, once you take on caregiving, you realize there are few affordable options to share the responsibility.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
that's an excellent point. What I will say to that is, I think every human being has capacity if they are rational and cognitively able, meaning there are no cognitive deficits or there are not significant cognitive deficits to provide care for somebody. That's not, you're not a caregiver only because somebody raised you to be one. You are a caregiver because you are a human who can empathize, who can see needs, who can ask questions, who can read literature and Google and put, now we got AI, put the question in there, who can reach out to the doctors, who can, that makes you the caregiver. So while I your point is salient that it is not second nature for the boy child, or let's talk about the man, I want you to know that there are very, very capable men who, when given the
Mhm.
opportunity, when it's not taken from them, as it's we often do without even realizing that we do, that they will rise to the occasion. That and they will do it better than us. Why? Because they don't know and they will ask for help. They will ask the kinds of questions that we may not think to ask because we do think that we know it all, and because we have been doing some kind of caring for others for so long, we take for granted that this particular instance may be different. And as you will, who may have had more time thinking about or practicing caregiving, whether it's for your dolls, your younger siblings, your cousins, your, you know, serving in the nursery at church, all of the different ways that women find themselves kind of being nurturers even before they have their own children, even outside of that kind of exposure for a man. It is just by nature for us as humans to be empathetic and to anticipate the needs of the welfare of others because the needs are usually the same, right? Now they may be less attuned to it because if they don't have to pay attention, then it could miss you. But when they are present, and if they are present, I do think that they can and they do a good job. Well, part B for that question, remind me.
Oh, it was just a comment that once you take on caregiving, you realize there are few affordable options to share the responsibility.
Yes. You asked about the Caribbean context, and that was the
Mhm.
one thing that it is crazy for us. I started to just see if there was research in the area on it and landed on lots of work that came out of University of West Indies in Jamaica. And it's tracking with my lived experience, which, I can't just center everything around what my experience is, but essentially that is correct. Developing countries do not have the kinds of programming and systems and infrastructure to provide the level of care consistently for the rate of aging and the rate of diagnosis now, particularly
Mhm.
of dementia and dementia within the family, Alzheimer's and dementia of the patient. So when you do find care, it is more specialized. Sometimes it's not even specialized, but it is expensive because economics.
Mhm.
Um, and if we think about it honestly, childcare is expensive, and elder care or disability care, or anybody who goes in care, you're going to you're going to want the same kinds of considerations that you think of with your child. You would not want to
Yeah.
put your 3 month old or even 13 month old in a nursery where that child is one of 40 and only three adults. Like, you're not going to do that. And while, the adult care could possibly do that ratio, depending on the diagnosis and the level of care, then you're going to see lots of slippages and lots of challenges in the people that you care for who are in that setting. So it is one of the biggest reasons why this falls so heavily to the children or that one child who kind of steps up and takes it on. But I thought what she was going to say was, once you start caregiving, you're stuck with it, because that's also true most times,
That's
is
true.
that once you step up that first time, then I think most people are just like, oh, you got it. Okay, then go for it. So it is very important, again, for you to use your voice, and you know, don't be petty. You don't have to say it in a way that's off-putting, but just basically, hey, I need help. And not only just broadly, I need help, but this is how you can help me. This is what you can do. And identifying the strengths in the people who are around you, who can add to the circle of care for the person that you are caring for.
That's good. Um, what came to mind too as you were talking about the genders is the term learned helplessness,
Mm-hmm.
and Brikelle's comment. And learned helplessness is something that I think we can address, right?
Yep.
Because we said it tends to fall on the women in the family. But what if the women in the family teach everyone that this is a shared responsibility? When I get older, when so and so gets older, hopefully all of you would take on some role, some responsibility versus the oldest daughter or the most responsible one, the strongest, or whatever the case may be. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it is honestly important to us to make caregiving a shared experience. Um, it's like any project, any task. And I don't mean to diminish the fact that we are caring for somebody that we love in a way of calling it a task or a project. But that's essentially what it is. There are going to be aspects of this that are going to require some expertise, some specific kinds of work or conversations. And, one person just isn't going to be designed to do that. For context, you reference learned helplessness, and learned helplessness usually emerges when the person, or as it was tested on emerged in, was animals, are put in an environment where their efforts are continually negated. So if they attempted to do something to change their situation, those efforts were not fruitful. And so they eventually just learn, well, I have no control. I can't change this, so it doesn't matter. And then they just default to, I'm just not going to do anything. I don't necessarily think that it is learned helplessness is the kind of the more popular one,
Mhm.
unless you were raised in a family who where it was toxic or abusive, and whether it's emotional, verbal, physical, where you were told that you could not or you were constantly blocked. But what I do think is there can be a looking around and feeling overwhelmed or thinking that this is not my thing, and then excusing yourself from it before you try or even give it a chance. And I do think there's something in the psyche of people with that, where it's like, that's not for me. Okay, I I'm out. And you didn't even explore. And I go back to my statement that caregiving is, if you consider it like a project, and if you were to divide it up like a project, you'll find that there is a piece of the caregiving pie that every person who is in that the system that loves that person would be able to contribute to. Because not everybody's going to have, let's use the example of dementia or challenges where they may be less present cognitively. Not everybody may have the patience or the kind of personality that can handle that, but you may be able to help with transportation to and from a doctor's visit. You
Mhm.
may be able to help with sourcing information or picking up the medication. You may be, like there's going to be all of these different things that can still contribute to the caregiving, because where we see that person getting stretched beyond all limits is when, and this is really where it really kills them, is that double duty of caregiving, where you are in your 40s or 50s and you are caring for your parent, and you also happen to maybe start your family later in life. So you also have a dependent who is still under the age of 18 who's dependent on you. And if you are the only person who's running around and trying to do all of the appointments and the visits and all of the kinds of things, yep, sandwich generation, and then also trying to provide, then that just creates another level of just stress that is, I think, a lot of times unnamed. And the tragedy of us not naming things is that people suffer in silence because you don't know how to describe it. You don't know what to say. You don't want to sound like you're complaining, or that somebody's going to judge you because you can't handle it. But why you had the child? Well, when I had the child, I didn't
You're
expect my
fine.
parents to also then need all this level of support, or
Mhm.
and sometimes that's not even here or there. But it's those kinds of things that would make someone more likely to just kind of get stuck in that cycle, when this could be tackled in a very, very practical way.
Right. Okay, so a comment was just made. My 9-year-old is always asking for play dates, and I keep saying that it would be fabulous if we do something similar for our elderly loved ones. Imagine a small group of trusted caregivers, maybe daughters, taking turns hosting each other's parents for a few hours on a Saturday. The seniors can enjoy games, conversation, and companionship in a safe environment, while each caregiver gets a little time to rest, run errands, or simply catch up on life.
Yeah.
There are a few daytime places for elderly parents to go during the weekdays, sorry. But the weekends can be rough in terms of finding somewhere safe to secure them. I tried to find another 2 or 3 persons to join a caregiving pool network like this. What are your thoughts?
I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely the kind of innovation that would counter the lacking, or the, let's call it, the lacking infrastructure that we have for seniors. So we don't have formal
Mhm.
long-term care services. We don't have even short-term care, as you noted. Saturdays, weekends are challenging. Uh, Many of them close by 5 o'clock. You need to pick up the person. All of these kinds of things. Again, it just literally reminds me of dealing with if you are a working parent and you have children, some of the same things that parents grapple with, caregivers are going to grapple with as well. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful idea. There are lots of considerations, I think, because it depends, on the cognitive capacities of the elders and, if they're potty
Mhm.
trained or not, like if they require the use of adult diapers. But I absolutely 100%. I think again, the innovation, the creativity to join as a community and to support each other, 100%.
Mhm.
Fantastic.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so speaking from the project side, I think that there are so many opportunities, right, for things to exist that they
Mm.
don't exist in
Yeah,
our country right now, or
yeah,
not on a large enough scale. And like for example, right now, and this is outside of the play dates, quote unquote, but I'm in Prague right now, and I'm noticing that there are so many older persons who have like mobility challenges, but they are using these walking sticks. And it's not the ones that are almost like hand braces. It's almost like if you watched or if you've done it yourself, people who are going skiing, and so they're using the poles, one in both hands, and that is how they are um, keeping their mobility. It's helping them with balance, and it doesn't compromise their quality of life because, I've noticed with my own grandparents, it's, as soon as you tell them to sit down or you stop them from doing something that kept them active, a decline happens pretty quickly after that.
yeah,
And I'm just looking around like this
yeah,
could be a business idea. Like someone can sell these walking sticks. I think that's what they're called. But that's a business opportunity.
yeah,
And there are so many more ideas and things where that comes from, everything from having someone who picks up the person and takes them for their appointments and accompanies them to, even doctor's appointments, because I also notice a lot of people when they go to the doctor, they don't ask questions. And so when it comes down to later on, they're talking to the loved one and the person is saying, okay, what did the doctor say? They're like, well, something wrong with my foot. Now, what
right,
I can't
right,
tell you. And so, even having someone there who is an advocate, who is taking notes, who can, maybe they can ask questions, right? They may not have a medical background, or that's for someone who does have a medical background, and they turn that into an opportunity. But there are so many ways and things that we can do. Now, of course, economically, we're a small country. And so, scaling things out to the point where they feel more affordable can be a challenge, but it can be done.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I definitely agree. And I know exactly the walking sticks you are referring to. I don't know why, but in my head, I associate them with Oprah. So I call them Oprah walking sticks. Her and Gail did one little track before, and that was the first time I saw them.
Indeed.
And so they belong to Oprah. Um, I, you know, I am a kind of social service girl at heart. And so every time I am faced with a life situation, I'm always like, oh, if I had the money, I would build this. But for me, it's usually more like larger things that are, you know, requires lots of research, lots of resources, lots of everything. But I do love the challenge that you're putting out there and the way that you're thinking about it in terms of these smaller niche things that can be done. And honestly, the doctor's one is like the biggest thing. My mom takes my dad to her doctor's appointment, and I so appreciate that she either records or she takes copious notes because half the time she don't know what they're saying. She misunderstanding what was said, and so by the time she comes home, she'll say to my sisters and I, and then we're like, okay, yes, this, no, that, no, go back to the doctor, that don't make sense, or something of that nature. And well, okay, so she has us to do that with. But what if she didn't?
What if she
She would
didn't?
be left again, even though she's advocating for him, she'd still be more clueless. So, um, you know, I even think of training one of these kind of AI things for to provide the, like pulling all of the data that is helpful related to insert whichever kind of diagnosis or care giving kind of thing and put it there. Why would you give somebody who's on RSEP, which is a popular medication for for memory disorders? Why
Mhm.
wouldn't you give them this medication? And it'll go there. And I'm saying creating that because the other ones are broad and pull information from everywhere that may not necessarily be accurate. But yes,
Yeah.
I this is exciting. It definitely is ripe and rich, and a lot of people are willing to spend their dollar if it's going to be helpful for them in a meaningful way, because there's a lot that have to be considered when it comes to caregiving.
Yes, agreed. I'm just looking at the comments. Sheena said that is a business opportunity and can be a big business. Also, doctor appointment services for the elderly. Yes. Raquel says developed countries look at aging from a public health perspective, so the infrastructure and services are developed in a coordinated manner. I want
Mhm.
to talk about that one. Um, and Maxine says in developed countries, elders and persons with disabilities are able to live more independently and
Yeah,
productively.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Yeah. I do want to say that if you continue, please feel free to continue to comment, drop your questions, and then also dropped in the chat a note to you. If you or anyone else in here is doing work in the space, feel free to drop your links as well. And you can use this to network and connect with each other.
Shanna, you turned the wrong way when you were checking the comments.
Okay. Did you guys hear me?
No, we heard you clearly. You just rotated. You're back. You're back
Oh,
up in the way that you should
okay.
be. You're good. You're good.
I don't know why. I feel like whenever I have to start a Zoom or do something to facilitate, then the Zoom or my computer is just like, no, we're not doing that today. So my question, one of the next questions was going to be, why is it that caregiving feels like it should be in-house, it should remain private versus being something that is a community concern, a national concern?
Yeah. I think honestly, it is the nature of our culture, of our people.
Mhm,
It starts from the untested assumptions that we started with. You started with, why is it that in Caribbean cultures in particular, this falls here?
mhm,
And so I think there's two sides to it, and I think both are tied to shame. One is the shame of, oh, I can't let anybody know that and you can insert whatever the person is going through and insert whatever the diagnosis or condition is.
mhm,
And then the other side of it is this unrealistic, and it's so weird because it's counter to our culture. I mean, culturally, we are
yeah.
people with extended families, the village raising you. You hear all of the stories going down the corner and doing all of the things and blah, 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 blah. So why doesn't that apply when you are older and you are caring for the elderly? But for whatever reason, I think there's another level of shame that is assigned to, you can't support your parent by yourself. And
Mhm,
so I think it is all framed around failure. And no one wants to feel like a failure. And so, if there's the risk of feeling like a failure, then I would personally uh, suffer silently rather than bring it out to the fore. But it is
mhm,
shame, and I honestly don't know. Again, it's not an area that I necessarily spend a lot of time thinking about, I was very grateful that from the very beginning, while we didn't really walk around announcing anything, but it wasn't a, oh, we have to keep this a secret as it relates to my dad, because I think as soon as we started letting people know that that was helpful, we got offers of help and support and can still continue to do. And I truly think that was because there was a level of openness that was there from the very beginning. And the reality is that we care about each other, right? So there are
Yeah.
people who we have journeyed with, whether they are blood or otherwise. And if we knew early enough, in the same way that we will buy the South tickets or, the kinds of things that we would, if we were asked or given the opportunity to participate, we would, most people would. I don't think the average person would feel like would feel anything. Now, I can still hear the voices of some would be like, oh, why they need to have other people support? They're supposed to be able to do it themselves. And at that point, it's just like, well, we can't. So we thank you for those who
Mm-hmm.
are happy to support us and those who are not in a position or who choose not to. God bless you as well. But
Mm-hmm.
shame, um, and this kind of feeling like a failure, and those go hand in hand and wanting to avoid both of them.
Mm-hmm. So, how can a caregiver tell the difference between normal stress and the distress that requires professional help?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I am of the opinion that normal stress even requires professional help. Um, but I think when we're looking for signs that are disrupting to the regulatory routines for your body. So when I say regulatory, the body, the way that God designed our body is beautiful. And it's always to maintain a homeostasis, meaning that all of the systems
Mhm.
are at the levels that they should be at operating. One of the things that ensures that, in addition to our diet and exercise, is rest. When you are able to get a good night's sleep, you are able to allow your body to reset, and
Mhm.
levels that may have been elevated or things that may have been out of whack have an opportunity to self-correct. And the way that our body is it really is self-corrective. The genius of God in the way that we were created. So I start to, the questions that I go through with clients, not necessarily truly for caregiving, but it would 100% be my questions if I was caring or providing mental health services or even just practical emotional services for somebody who's caregiving is, how are you sleeping? I don't want to know how the person is sleeping. I want to know how you're sleeping. What is your quality of sleep? What is your diet? Are you getting reasonable time for yourself? Does your life entirely revolve around this caregiving? Those kinds of questions are going to form a little bit of a checklist for me, and certain responses are going to flag whether I'm waving red flags that there are concerns or not.
Mhm.
There is a caregiving uh, assessment, a tool that's used, and I'm trying to remember. It's like it's looking at burden and really trying to help determine or like kind of parse out the demands. And I know there's physical, there's emotional, and then mental that they're looking to assess for each person who is in the role of caregiving. I think there's some, well, it's broken down into, these other areas that are more specific, but that's the broader thing across those three larger areas of spectrum.
Mhm.
And this is that's what we want to pay attention to. But
Mhm.
I think a little bit of help, we all can benefit from it in every area of our life, every time.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, so one of my questions is, as we are about to move into the support portion, what language do we tend to use concerning the caregiver, um, that unintentionally adds pressure?
Good question. What language do we use that adds pressure? I think anytime we overemphasize the relationship between the person, that's your mommy, that's your daddy. And I'm not negating that there is a level of additional responsibility for kinship. But again, I think this idea that kinship automatically means primary caregiver and not shared and not needing resources is flawed and unhealthy. And we need to get rid of it immediately. Absolutely immediately. And if we think about women, let's think about women when they first give birth. And again, going back to what was the case. Most women who have had children, I'd say 80s and before, it still trickled down because I'm a benefit of it. So I'm very grateful for it. Would normally have another family member or family members who are going to be at your home supporting you in these very specific capacities during those early days after you have the child. Nothing was wrong with that. Um, there is going to be a level of expectation that there's somebody else that the child can go to, that you're going to have a babysitter or a family member or something like that. I don't understand why, when we are talking about the older generation and the person being responsible for them having shared resources, why it's a problem. And the thing of it is that with having a baby, you get maternity leave where you get that like dedicated, concentrated time for, at the very least for most people, I think 4 to 6 weeks, maybe minimum kind of thing. Some people, if they are in certain kinds of organizations, get up to 3 months or shy of 3 months. Um, but the caregiver very rarely does. They have to remain in their work, sometimes extending work to be able to ensure insurance. I mean, to ensure insurance continuity for as long as possible, to ensure that there is enough income coming in. Like, I'm thinking about the partner and the spouse, where now that person is no longer able to contribute in a meaningful way, and so it's only you. Again, talking about sandwich generation and those who are working because they have other responsibilities in addition to their parents. And so I just, I don't know. And I think there may be some of the individualism that has crept in and may have tainted what would have been a very community-based experience. But
Mhm.
then yeah, I genuinely don't know. I do think that would be the kinds of questions that we would need to like ask. Like, research would help us to really determine where and when it changed. And maybe it didn't change. Maybe it's always been like that. Um,
Mhm.
but it just, because the more people are working now than we're working, we're feeling it in a different way because there's the timing and the generations and the kinds of expectations of who's doing what. People are working old. Those who are working longer. People who traditionally weren't working are working. So when it comes to
Mhm.
caretaking for those who are older, there's less availability and greater expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. A comment was made in the chat. Someone was relaying a story of when they were younger. They saw someone who they knew to be a teacher, and the person was walking, took them to the school, and then realized something was off, and the person has dementia. And so, heralding the need to let people know and not keep it a secret can actually help the person. Yeah. Okay. So, let's talk about the invisible work that goes into caregiving, right? Do you have thoughts on how employers even can support the caregiver, the friends, the family.
Yeah. So I think support starts with the caregiver acknowledging they need support and specifically asking for the kind of support that they need. If you've ever done any kind of first aid training, you are told when you rush to a scene, if, in the sense of if somebody is there and you are going to provide CPR, first aid, or whatever, that you look around and you specifically identify. You say, if I don't know names, then I say, you lady in the mustard color shirt, please call 911 and give them this specific information. And I look around and I say, you in this one, please go ahead and get me source a bottle of water, room temperature.
Mhm.
That is absolutely required. That level of detail is required. And to get there, it goes back to this invisible load because you have to project manage. You have to know what you need, when you need it, how often you need it, and then be able to identify who can provide it for you with the needs. But
Mhm.
I went back to the example of, and we've talked a little bit about it, kind of showing up at the doctor's office, providing additional support at the doctor's office, driving. They are fortunate enough to go to one of the elderly daycares, picking them up to picking them up or dropping them off, getting medication, making appointments. Like if you are a busy person, I can't tell you, I am on day 3 of, oh, I need to call the doctor to make the appointment. I have a referral that I've had from my annual in May. It is July. And I
Mhm.
remember at 8:50, the doctor's office ain't open until 9. And then I remember again when I sit down at home at 6 and they close. So even just having somebody who may be a retiree or who say, you can say, these are the list of things. Can you make these calls and make these arrangements for me? That would be incredibly helpful. And it may seem so simple, right? It's like, what is that? I could do that. I will be honest. I think that is the biggest thing that we do that works against us is we trivialize these small things, but every single activity builds upon the other. It's when you have to give headspace to keep thinking about scheduling it, putting it in, doing it, that continues to just erode your resources, your time, your space, your ability to show up and do what you need to do. So um, project management, see it as a project. Where can you get the resources to help that? And who can you assign or ask to help you with those things?
Mhm. Okay. Um, so here are a few curveball questions, right? As we begin to wind down. If anyone has any comments or questions, please feel free to insert them in the chat. You can continue to do so. What conversations should families have before a health crisis occurs, like a major health crisis?
Um, I feel like every conversation. So things that, and again, I know we have a lawyer in the room, at least one. I saw her come in earlier, and she may have a better sense of this, but there are there are so many horror stories of so and so passed away or this thing happened and then they're no longer able to give consent and they don't have an active will or they don't have this or that. Um, I think it feels dark. Like, why are you being a Debbie Downer? Why are you doing this? But unless you have the kind of family that can rally together under tense circumstances and be adults, and I say that with no shade, then it behooves you to begin to think about if something happens, who does what, and kind of giving people a idea that this is what they'll be expected to do. Now, I think psychologically that is hard because most of us don't want to accept that the people we love are aging or something awful can happen. And so I get why it may not happen. And practically, that's not something that you're going to just kind of randomly have conversations on. So I think whoever that responsible person is, uh, and we all, again, eldest child or,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
the girl or whatever, uh, probably at some point should be like, okay, something happens to mommy or daddy or
Mm-hmm.
to auntie, if you're raised by auntie or, whatever. Yeah, what would I do? And
Mm-hmm.
at the very least, begin to entertain the idea. You don't have to go into lots of detail, but I think at the very least, begin to entertain the idea. Give yourself permission to entertain the idea because that's a big thing to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and what would you need? What would you need to have access to? What's the kind of information? Where is this information stored? How do you access it? Um, those kinds of things. And again, not necessarily the area that I spend a lot of time thinking about, but those are the things that really
Mm-hmm.
pops to mind. Because when tragedy hits, and it doesn't have to be sudden death, it could just be a stroke. Not that
Mm-hmm.
a stroke isn't huge. I just mean
Mm-hmm.
it could just be a something that happens that maybe temporarily or even potentially permanently like incapacitates the person in a way that shifts in just like the blink. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think at a certain point you start really thinking about that. Like, what do I do? If you are an only child, I need you to have that, like, sit down and have that conversation with yourself. Like, okay, who am I calling on? Who can be helpful? Go talk to mommy or daddy and say, where your things is? Like, where do you have this? Who has this? Is your
Yeah.
will done? Who holds the
Mm-hmm.
will? Where you have it stored?
Mm-hmm.
Executor, like all the kinds of things that, again, for whatever reason, Bahamians just we don't do culturally. Like I know we're breaking out of the mold, and there's more conversations about it. And I'm grateful for all of the platforms that are created to challenge it. But I think culturally, it was just everybody. You just hear about the drama after something happens. Like everybody
Yeah.
falling out because nobody know who was supposed to do what. And not that anybody has to have a fixed role, but at least just having a sense of what to do, where to find it, and where to go is a good starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV at all. I just know that um, one time before one of my parents had a major surgery, I said, do you have a will? Oh no, we'll get to it eventually. "Hmm, but you're about to have major surgery. And you know that if anything happens, I am the responsible one. And so, and it was literally, I had to spell it out and say, listen, you're going to put me in a position. I won't appreciate being in that position if something goes wrong. And furthermore, these are the implications. And here's what I'm prepared to do and what I'm not prepared to do. Because even in my own family, I've seen things happen. People come out of the woodwork, all types of things happen. We all know stories, right? And
Yes.
I think at some point we have to put feelings aside and listen. Where do you have a will? Ask outright.
Yeah.
I know it's abrupt. I know it took the person by surprise, but at the same time, I would be the cleanup person. And
Yeah.
I knew that. And I think for me, it was just me standing up for myself in that moment and saying, listen, you're not being fair to consider me and what could happen
Yeah.
afterwards. And I
Yeah,
think I am not I was a very temporary caregiver, so I don't live this day in and day out. But I think that caregivers also have to advocate for themselves, you know. Um,
they do.
everyone will not advocate for you. There may be no one to advocate for you, but you have to advocate for yourself because there is a level of peace of mind, I think, that needs to be had. Um, and yeah, that's just my thought. Even if confrontation has to happen and very few people like it, it's not comfortable, but hard conversations need to be had. And even just a slow introduction of, hey, where are your papers? Like you said, Dr. Gier, and who's holding this? Do I know everything? Who has access to certain things, just to
Yeah,
warm them up to the idea. But I think we also have to be organized as well, because I think a lot of us are secretive. Exactly, Gina. Our culture, we are secretive,
you really
you
are.
know, that's a problem. Yeah.
And it hurts us more than it's helpful.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And even when it comes to financials, right? And it costs money to care for someone. It costs money to breathe, right? When you add when you add in, you know, how much it costs for even like, for example, adult diapers, right? One box. And if you don't say, hey, this is how much this costs per month or per week,
Yeah.
but you're absorbing that, hoping that someone will step in and ask, how can I help? Or what do you need? No, this is the bill. This is how much I spend on these things that are necessary. Um, let's talk
This is
about
how often they need them.
contributions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. These are real conversations that need to be had. But I understand it's not easy. And I understand, especially when you're talking about family, some people are explosive, some people are sensitive. There are different family dynamics. So I don't want to minimize that at all. There are different personalities at play. And I think a lot of people who are caregivers are not necessarily the ones who are going to stand up for themselves, unfortunately, or they have to play nice, or they feel like they have to play nice. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we are starting to wrap up. Um, Let me just check the chat. Yes, we hide stuff even from ourselves. A question is, are there medical authorization forms available to be used? And if so, are they legal in the Bahamas?
Oops.
The lawyer is still in the chat. I don't think so. Oh, yes. Lawyer who is lawyer who is may or may not be able to respond by answering that question if there are medical forms that can be completed and if they are medical authorization forms that can be completed and if they are legal in the Bahamas. That's very important. Okay, so let's talk about how does a caregiver who may be trying to avoid being at the end of their rope, how do they express the need for help? I know you said to be specific about what they need, and even getting to that point to be able to admit that they need help.
Yeah.
But like I said, people are complicated.
Yeah.
So, what happens if there's some form of contention or pushback as to, well, why do you need help?
Yeah.
What else can that person do?
So my first thought is to go to the next person. Um, I think we, again, going back to kinship care, we automatically think, and there's a reason for it, uh, the way that life is set up and animals, we are part of the animal kingdom. The way that animals are designed is that we protect ourselves and then we protect our blood relatives first. So I think it is natural that in that protective mode of kind of kinship, that the people who are related are the ones who should be, I'm going to use a very strong word, taxed with the care of the person.
Mhm.
I will challenge that to say there are many stories of care for and support for care that emerges consistently outside of the family. It is your networks. It is the people who love you and who will step in to do something for you because they don't want to see you burnt out. Maybe doing
Mhm.
that faster than your sibling who may be like, "Eh, you have it all together," or they're so removed from the realities or in denial or any of those things that they just aren't, they're choosing not to step up. So don't get discouraged if the first person you reach out to makes you feel like you're a failure or that you should be handling this or that you're the only person who cares and to do it. Ask again. I
Mhm.
don't think there's anything wrong with strangers supporting you in
Mhm.
the sense of like through services that may be provided. I
Mhm.
think that's the next thing. Is like, oh, you got that person coming in your house? Yeah, because I have determined that I cannot be a 24-hour caregiver. I need to have time away. So yes, I will pay the $40 for the hour or the $80 for the 2 hours or whatever it works out to be, so that one afternoon I could drive by the beach and just look at the water and breathe. And I will put that in my budget and do that for X amount of days because that is important to me. There was something you
Mhm.
said, Shanna, when you were was recounting your story with your parents, and you were like, because there are some things that I'm prepared to do and things that I'm not prepared to do. I think the best thing that you can do for yourself as a caregiver is establish a boundary about how you protect yourself.
Mhm.
That means a commitment more than an oath. So I don't need you to be like, I will never, or any of those kinds of things. I just need you to be thoughtful about, I desire this for my life. I want to be a good partner, a good daughter, a good son, a good, whatever, and support this person in this way. But I also realize that in order for me, the best version of myself to show up for them, I have to take care of myself. So these are the things that I will protect. I will ensure that if I have to insert whatever it is, that I will allow myself to have a rest day afterwards. That may mean using a sick day if the next day is a work day. That may mean uh, calling somebody who could come in and and again, it is getting creative, right? It is thinking outside the box. It is not determining that if your most immediate family member has said no, then that means you're on your own. I really, really believe that God resources us. And so even when who we think should be there isn't,
Mhm.
that there's going to be another outlet. You just gotta look. You gotta keep your eyes open and you gotta be willing to see where's the ram in the thicket because it's going to be there. So
Mhm.
the first no or the first kind of flack that you get does not determine that you are on your own. There are other
Mhm.
options.
Mhm.
I go back to, so, and the other thing is your boundaries. So one is the asking again, and the second one is setting your boundaries before you burn out and honoring them. Doesn't mean you're going to be inflexible. Doesn't mean if you say, I'm going to have one night off every week because it's too much for me to do it, that maybe
Mhm.
if all of the caretakers for the night that you chose ended up being assigned and you have to wait for an extra week, you know, it doesn't mean that you can't do that or that you go crazy or you feel like you fail because of it. But you set the intention. Set the
Mhm.
intention, I think, is the most important thing that you can do. This is what I will do. This is what I'm not prepared to do. Um,
Mhm.
and be kind to yourself in the midst of that, honestly.
Yeah. Okay. We are going to wrap up. I did just drop a survey link that we would really appreciate it if everyone on the call would complete this post discussion. Note that you will get a replay to this conversation in your inbox. You will also get a QR code that you can scan, and that will give you more information on how to reach out to Dr. Gia. You will also get her worksheet on the different masks that people use. And it's a self reflection, right? That you can go through and ask yourself if you fit any one of those particular categories. And then, of course, you will also get this survey link to complete as well. As we wrap up, does anyone have any questions or thoughts? Um, but Dr. Gia, I would like for you to wrap up if you can, like, if you were talking to a caregiver and they were saying, I'm suddenly thrust in this role, or even I've been in this role and I'm exhausted in this role, what is the one piece of advice that you would give them to get through this journey?
So I think asking for help. And the first thing that you may ask for help with may not be the practical thing of somebody to come and sit with this person, although that may
Mhm.
be necessary in order to get where I'm going. But I think the first set of help would be sitting with somebody who's objective. Doesn't have to be a formal therapist at this point. I think a trusted, mature person who can sit with you and help you just understand where you are at. And what do I mean by that? Again, not the depths of therapy, but just I'm feeling depleted and I don't know where I landed at that. And it may be hard when you're in the midst of it to do it, but somebody who cares about you, somebody who's will make space for you, would be able to either point out, um, would be able to gently nudge, would be able to
Mhm.
ask a question that may get you to be able to
Mhm.
see. I think it is really, really important for you to understand where you went. Like where is it? What is consuming you? Where did that happen? How is that being sustained in ways that you don't want it to be sustained? And how do
Mhm.
you move from that place? Some of that definitely requires professional intervention, but some of that just is the one question that you sit with yourself and you ask, how did I get here? And the next question is, how do I systematically? This is an intentional step. This is not like, oh, oops, this can happen now, or maybe I'll do it later. How do I
Mhm.
systematically add the thing back into my life
Mhm.
that pours into me in a way that gives me meaning?
Mhm.
How do I position myself so that I'm not always on the side of pouring, but I'm able to
Mhm.
receive? What do I need to do to position myself to receive? Those are the kinds of questions that I think you need to sit with.
Mhm.
And then from there, then you break out your project management hat, even if you never did the training, and you break down the caretaking and the responsibilities, even if it's a simple spreadsheet. You're just like, these are the things that I have to do on a regular. Where can I delegate? Who are the people in my life who I know have capacity? Um, and then systematically go through and begin to ask for help. and see if there can be a commitment from them for whenever this particular thing comes up, if they can do it. If it
Mhm.
means that they are somebody who is, I don't know, I'm trying to think and be creative, like um, maybe drives, long drives, maybe soothing for your parent. Maybe it may be the one thing that puts them to sleep. Reminds me of kids, right? We throw them in the car seat, throw them in the car and drive around. Maybe there's somebody who drives for a living or is on the road a lot and doesn't mind running the errands with them so that they get out of the house or out of the place. Um,
Mhm.
you know, again, be creative. I really, really, really love Maxine's, I think it was Maxine, who the example of the kind of play date and the adult play date.
Mhm.
I think if we can begin to think about more creative ways like that, where we can support each
Mhm.
other in this kind of safe, caring fashion, then it will counter a lot of what we are missing systemically as a country. Because the other person's comment, they're accurate, right? This is not seen as public health. At least we're not there yet. I hope
Mhm.
maybe soon, in a way that resources are put in so it's not just after the fact. And not that government doesn't subsidize. Government does subsidize many things that do exist, but it's just not at the scale or at the level where it is thoughtful or sufficient.
Okay. And are there any particular resources or support organizations or services that you could think of to point people to, whether it's for mental and emotional support?
I don't know of a lot. I know there's the Alzheimer's Association for caregivers, family members who are with somebody who has Alzheimer's, and that includes those with dementia.
Mhm.
Uh, there are the one thing that we must not underestimate is the depth of the reach of the local church. Many, many church communities offer safe spaces. It may not be called for caregivers in the literal way, but it could be something that offers you an outlet that you are able to be a part of and be connected and get poured into. And so you just again, you want to for me this is more about creativity rather than saying what we don't have. So if we can get over the fact that okay, fine, we don't have them. We don't have the things that we need in order for I think maximizing this experience. But what do we
Mhm.
have? And what can be leveraged in a way that we can benefit in the absence of this particular thing?
Mm. Okay, thank you for that. So as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Gia, for being willing to share from your vantage point and um, I'm really advocating for the strong ones. And guys, if you don't have that book, I know she's working on a second edition of that book, but there's the first one. And can I tell you, and I say this may sound bad, but I started to read the book, I put it down, I never finished the book, but it freed me. And so from I read what I read, immediately I was like, I'm done. I'm done being the strong one. I am done being Superwoman. I am done being the person that everyone relies on. And not only that, but I have given that book to people. I have sent people a link to buy the book. I tell people if you've never heard about the book, go look for the book. Um, I am very much so a believer in undoing because it's a psychological undoing that we have to do when it comes to the strong one. But first, it takes us identifying ourselves, and I definitely went through that process because of this book, and I'm still reaping the benefits years later. Again, of me being able to say this is what I'm willing to do, and this is what I'm not willing to do, because I don't want to identify as the strong one anymore. And so I also want to say that if you want to get more information, find out more about our project, the Silver Economy Growth Hub, which we also refer to as Silver Carib, you can also feel free to visit our website. All of this information will come to you in a post conversation email that includes the replay link to this conversation. So, thank you so much for tuning in. And I want to leave you with this closing question. If we truly valued caregivers, what would we do differently today and tomorrow? Whether it's in the workplace, whether it's at home, whether it's the healthcare system, whether it's community, whether it's government and policy, what would we do differently tomorrow and today? Thank you so much. And we will see you again soon for our next Silver Forum. Have a good evening, everyone, and take care.